To Japanese speakers and learners alike, it's no secret that writing Japanese is an arduous and complex process. Since it has thousands of characters, all with their own unique pronunciation and meaning, it can be quite tricky for a lot of learners. Usually, when people first learn Japanese, they learn the Japanese syllabaries, hiragana and katakana, collectively known as kana. But there's a whole world of kana outside of what is commonly taught, a lot of which isn't even known by native Japanese speakers. So today I'll explain the lesser known types of kana and their functions, so if that interests you, be sure to watch till the end, because things get stranger and stranger the deeper we go. I'd like to shout out two YouTube channels that have helped a lot in the research for this video, the first one being Xiao's channel and his series, Kana They Don't Teach You in School. It's been super helpful for me, and it's pretty informative if you're interested in these more obscure aspects of Japanese. I'd also like to recommend Ngetoma and their video, You Don't Know Hiragana Yet. This one's really interesting too, but this one is in Japanese, so if you don't know Japanese or aren't super comfortable with it, then it might be hard to understand, but there are subtitles. I think they're auto-generated English subtitles. So there are two kinds of rare kana. There are the obsolete kana and there are Hentaigana. Obsolete kana are the characters that did have some standardized use in Japanese, but were eventually phased out. And Hentaigana are colloquial characters that see some use, but in rare and specific contexts. Let's go over obsolete kana first because it's the easiest to explain, and they're the ones that you will most likely see. So there are two obsolete kana, or I guess four of them, for the sounds we and we. Let's go over we first because we is used much more than we. In fact, we is almost never used. Usually we is used in some Okinawan words, an example of a word being winagu, which means female, and wiman, which means now. It's also used as digraphs. So a digraph are those combination characters you'll see when there is a big kana and a small kana next to it. These combinations that are used to make sounds that don't have their own specific characters. Sounds like cho. We can be used in digraphs for sounds like kui and gui in Okinawan. An example is the word kuimun, which means food. Probably the most iconic example of the we kana would be a Nikka whiskey. So the whiskey brand Nikka, they will write whiskey on their bottles using the katakana we. So instead of writing it uisuki, they'll write uisuki. Even though the word whiskey in Japanese typically doesn't use the we katakana, Nikka uses it in order to give them a distinct brand identity and make them stand out amongst competitors. Fictional names will use them too, like the Toho character Inaba Tewi. Technically it's pronounced Tei, not Tewi, but I say Tewi for the purpose of this video because she has the we hiragana in her pronunciation. The creator of the manga Nichijou actually uses a pen name Arawi Keiichi. Wet is pretty much never used now, but it has been used historically. It was used in the writing of some kanji, like this kanji right here, which means yen. Nowadays it's pronounced en, but back in the day it actually used to be written like this, which is pronounced en, but it's written as when. The next type of kana, which makes up the bulk of strange and obscure kana, is Hentaigana. So Hentaigana translates to variant characters. They existed in the past and used to be super common, and they're essentially different variations of what are the modern day standard kana. Sort of like how in English you can write the letter A like this and also like this, well back in the day you could write the character A in all of these different ways. Hentaigana used to be more common, but a Japanese governmental language reform ended up phasing out a lot of them by standardizing kana. If you look at the kana chart though, you will notice three spaces where there are blanks, and these are the spaces where yi, yet, and wu would be. Now, you would think that this is because yi, yet, and wu don't exist in the Japanese language, but they kind of do. There are some Japanese words that have yi and yet pronunciations, an example being the word yay, which comes from the English word yay. But these are written with digraphs. So the word yay is written like this. So you'll have the E, and then you'll have a small e in order to make the ye sound. In order to make the yi sound, you'll have an e and then another smaller e next to it. As far as wu goes, I haven't found any Japanese words that have that sound in it. The closest one I could come to is a Japanese pronunciation of the Roman god Vulcan, which is pronounced Urukanis. The only one of these kana that actually even has a Unicode symbol is the hiragana ye. I don't know why this has a Unicode symbol and the others don't. I have never seen this anywhere except on Wikipedia, but it has a Unicode symbol. Hentaigana doesn't refer to all non-standard kana, only the single syllable ones. There are actually kana that are written with multiple syllables, which sounds antithetical to the idea of kana, being that it's a syllabary where one character represents one syllable. But these multisyllabic kana actually used to be super common. Goryakugana are kana that represent combinations of kana or specific words. They're sort of similar to how the ampersand or an at symbol works in English. These are distinctly separate from kanji though, since they formed as a way to make writing kanji quicker versus kanji, which were Chinese characters that were adapted to Japanese. In fact, hiragana and katakana came from kanji, and Goryakugana came from kana. Some examples of Goryakugana are koto, yori, and tomo, but there are a lot of them. These characters were widely used until they were completely taken out of Japanese during a year 1900 language reform. You can see old Japanese documents and signs from before 1900 and see these characters there, and sometimes they're used artistically to convey a sense of quaintness and antiquity. So all the kana that I've showed previously have been completely separate characters from the standard kana that are taught in school, but there are actually quite a bit of kana that exist as modifications of the standard characters using diacritics. Diacritics in Japanese are the strokes that are added to kana characters to modify their sounds. There are two of these in Japanese, dakuten, which looks like two dots, and handakuten, which is a circle. Colloquially, they're called tenten, which means dots, and maru, which means circle. Tenten is used to indicate that a consonant should be voiced. For example, the character ka is pronounced ga when it uses a tenten. So it goes from the unvoiced k to a voiced g consonant sound. The usage of maru are more specific, and they are used on h or f consonants. So in the base set of kana, there is ha, hi, fu, he, ho, and when you put maru on these, it turns into pa, pi, pu, pe, po. In standard Japanese, diacritics are only used with voiceless consonants. The voiceless consonants in Japanese being t, s, k, h, ch, ts, and f. But in some dialects of Japanese, diacritics can be added to voiced kana to make all sorts of sounds. The most salient example of these would be bidakuon, which are nasal sounds. Bidakuon are made when you put maru on a kana that has a k consonant. This ends up making a ng sound, like in king or sing. The bidakuon sounds are nga, ni, ng, nge, and ngo. Now, these characters right here are only used when teaching certain dialects and accents of Japanese. They are not used in everyday writing. You will never see anyone write these. The sounds that I just read off are sometimes used in the Tokyo dialect of Japanese, also known as Tokyo-ben. In standard Japanese, this sentence is pronounced watashi ga, which means I am. But in Tokyo-ben, this can be pronounced watashi ga, which means the same thing, but the pronunciation is slightly different. The Tokyo-ben turns the voiced ga sound into a nga, a nasal sound. So using hiragana nga displays the sound. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, why do that? Japanese already has a hiragana for the sound, so why not just write that? Well, the reason why is because of how the Japanese syllables work. So in Japanese, each syllable gets its own allotted space in a word, and is considered its own syllable. So if I write watashi ga like this, it's not watashi ga, it's watashi ga. Not only is it longer because the sound has the same space pronunciation as the ga sound, but it doesn't soften the g. It stays as a voiced consonant and not a nasal. Nga takes twice as much time to say as nga. If we're going to put this in English terms, it's sort of similar to the word singer. You say singer, not singer. Probably the most common abnormal use of diacritics is using them on sounds that have no consonants, like a, I, U, E, O. Adding diacritics on these sounds turns them into a more rough, dirty sound. It would be ah. This is pretty much only used in manga though. You won't really see it anywhere else. Tenten can also turn the u kana into vu, so from a vowel sound to a v sound. The final use of diacritics that I want to go over is their use in Kanbun. Now, I'm not going to go super deep into Kanbun because Kanbun is a whole other video in itself. Kanbun is a system of pronunciation for classical Chinese. So back in the day, the Japanese elite would write in classical Chinese, but they had a specific syllabary in order to write the Japanese pronunciation of these Chinese characters. It was sort of like the predecessor to hiragana. But the Kanbun used for classical Chinese is very different than what hiragana is today. Actually, let me show you this. This poster that I had on my wall back there actually has Kanbun on it. So what's written here actually isn't Japanese, it's classical Chinese, and all the little characters that you see next to the Chinese characters are Kanbun, and that's the Japanese pronunciation of these characters. Of course, it's not the pronunciation of the characters now, because classical Chinese isn't spoken in Japan anymore, or really anywhere in the world. And with that little show and tell, I'll put an end to my needlessly complex video on characters that almost nobody uses or needs to know how to use. But if you enjoyed it and you learned something today, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you a ton. In the last video, I said that I typically don't like asking people to subscribe, and that's true. But I'm trying to get my channel to 1,000 subs so that way I can monetize my videos, which would help me out greatly if I could get some money from doing this. As much as I love making these videos, my personal life is pretty busy and I work a lot, and having a little bit of extra income on top of what I do make would help me a ton. So if you like this video, be sure to subscribe. I guarantee you won't regret it. There's a lot of great videos coming in the future. Once again, thank you so much. I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.